The Power Hour is on the air, live streaming you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. It's great to have everybody in. We've got a jam-packed show for you. Of course, it being the slowest news week of the year, but that's not going to be an excuse for us. We're all about finding the top stories. We're all about finding intriguing stories, and of course, keeping you interested as we march our way to Training Camp 2022. But first, we've got a very special guest. Let's go ahead and get him in while we've got a free moment. Joining us on the show tonight from their live show on YouTube as well, it's our good friend, NFL Outdated.
How you doing? I'm excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
We're glad to have you on the show, man. And let's just say, I definitely wanted to get it out first. A very big fan of what you've been doing out there.
Appreciate
I've actually got a chance to just sit down and watch some of your videos. So very good stuff.
Appreciate that. Yeah. And, the connections have been fun. And honestly, I started them to learn more about fantasy football. And, that helps. But then the connections are great too.
So getting you in, and before we jump into all our topics of today, definitely excited to see what you have planned for the upcoming season. Anything you'd be willing to share? Just off the tip of the hat, not too much. I know you can't give away a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to continue to, do team podcast interviews. I'd love to, learn as much as I can and spread the news about as many podcasts as possible. Just kind of, connect people. Hoping to get, I've got a couple of NFL players, former NFL players, and I'm actually heading to the Hall of Fame here in about a week and a half, and I did the interview with the chief communications officer at the Pro Football Hall of Fame last week, and he was talking about connecting me to a couple of Hall of Famers. So keep an eye out for some of those things coming down the way.
NFL Outdated, keeping us updated on the upcoming events going on, especially going to the Hall of Fame. So very intriguing stuff. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on that and make sure everybody follow and like his page on YouTube and his Twitter page as well. What do you say, buddy? Let's go ahead and jump in our top news today.
Let's do it.
Let's welcome everybody to the Power Hour. I'm your host, Michael Bishop. Let's jump into it. Starting out with our top story of the day. Of course, no surprise, it's more Deshaun Watson. As if we haven't heard enough from Deshaun Watson, we got to keep giving you Deshaun Watson. Meaning his hearing will go into place today. That means the NFLPA and the NFL will sit down with arbitrator Sue Robinson to potentially discuss an upcoming punishment for the alleged situation that he was put between 26 accusers. As we know, 20 of the 24 have been settled at this point. So, Outdated, let's start with you. If you're the NFL, you know that all eyes are on you in this situation, especially with the way things are today. What is the best way to go about this, and what would be the best way to sell that a year suspension is where they need to go with this?
I don't know if a year suspension is what they could sell. I mean, obviously a lot of people are talking about wanting that, but he already did sit out last year, right? I mean, so it'll be interesting to see if they do try to do that. I think the NFLPA might really push back on that, right? And I think, if it's lengthy enough, maybe 10 games or something like that, and then it's like, both sides kind of save face a little bit. I mean, that's a significant chunk of the season, right? And he also had, last year. So, I just, I don't know with how things have gone, how you could really just say, okay, you're done for the season. And, with everything kind of being settled, it's tough all around. I think probably the toughest thing is, I would have to say, for Browns fans, because I know I've interviewed a number of Browns fans, and even when they first signed him, you want your team to win, but how do you root for someone who's been accused of all these things?
And a great point there, seeing the NFLPA is definitely going to bring up the point that he's already been out the year, and more than likely a situation that they'll potentially bring up is with the owners, especially with Daniel Snyder and the legal situation he is with the sexual assault case in 2009 and appearing in front of a congressional Congress, which he's refused to do twice, and now refusing apparently with a subpoena in place. I'm sure that that's going to be a main argument point there. But do you think that the NFL is going to try and counter with the situation and try to bring the Ben Roethlisberger situation up as what they had to make the decision there with?
Yeah, they definitely can. I mean, and that's, that could play into it as well. Things have definitely changed since then. As far as kind of, what is out there in the social media and everything. And that could definitely be a factor in what they decide. But if they're smart, they, honestly, I think, they would not go with the full year, honestly, because really, like, anytime you're negotiating, you want, you don't want to look like the bad guy, right? And right now, Deshaun Watson, looks like the bad guy in the situation with everything that he's kind of done. If the NFL, go ahead and just does the year off, it really sets a precedent for a lot of things kind of going forward. I mean, and especially since things haven't been settled yet. It's just it's the NFL is in a tough place. I think if they go for the year, it really just I think it hurts them in the long run.
And Tom Busby comes in saying that potentially that Watson could have more cases on the horizon, maybe sooner or later. So a judgment on this case is especially critical, knowing that if more cases come out, that this judgment could come out as early as potentially before training camp, that this might be a black eye to the NFL and the NFLPA. So is it best to get a decision in now, or would it be best to just wait to see what would happen in the next month or two?
I think it'd just be best to get a decision because I mean you don't want to keep kicking the can down the road, but really when you look at this, obviously if these things are true, Deshaun Watson, there's a lot of missteps there, but really one of his biggest missteps it sounded like was when the first one came out and he didn't settle right away because then that opened the Pandora's box for all these other accusers to come forward and everything, and so I think a lot of times some of these high profile athletes they just kind of assume that they're above the law sometimes, or that things won't be found out. But in this day and age of social media, things are going to come out, and that's the tough thing too with Busby. I mean, he seems to be wanting to play it out in the social media. So I mean, that's and in the media, and it's just like okay, well, let's get this decided, so then everybody can move on. Like not only NFL, but Browns fans, and just let's gonna have it decided, and then if something's coming up in the future that say someone is wrongfully accused of something, I'm not saying in this case, and then you just have a group of people that go ahead and do that, it's easy to try that in the media, and really these things should be tried not in the media. I mean, that's it's just going to set an interesting precedent if they go for the year. I just don't think they can.
And another interesting point that you did bring up, Jacoby Brissett more likely is going to be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns amidst whatever situation happens with Deshaun Watson, whether it be a year, whether it be 10 or 12 games. From a standpoint right there, just to put the legal situation aside and actually discuss some football, can Brissett actually help the Browns throughout that process? Can he help this team potentially win some big games?
Yeah, he can by handing the ball off. He's not a quarterback that you can ask to win the game. I mean, as a Titans guy, I mean, you probably saw that on the other side with the Colts. I mean, when he was playing against you, I'm sure you didn't. That's not a quarterback that you're worried about, and he's definitely going to have moments, but he would be an upgrade from what they had back up last year, but not that much. So I don't see maybe 500. But the biggest thing is going to be on the running game and the defense.
So I'll give you the role of the NFL commissioner, and you have the final say whether whatever happens. How many games does Deshaun Watson get suspended in your mind?
I say 10 to 12 games because, then it really is kind of that, happy medium. I mean, some people, you're going to upset someone on both sides, but that way, each side feels like they've won a little bit. Deshaun Watson, he already had the year plus another 10 games. That's pretty significant when you look at, some of the other scandals that we've had in the past. That's pretty significant in a player's career, especially a quarterback at the skill positions, and to have him miss 10 games, then it still gives him an opportunity on his side then to kind of get back into playing shape towards the end of the season, and then start to rebuild his image, and hopefully you know everyone kind of move forward from this.
And I think the final question on this before we move on, would it be in the best interest if the suspension gets handed down, whether it be a year or less, or would you think that they would include that he would get some kind of help, especially for the situation that he's found himself in, that it continues to be reoccurring, especially with the USA Today report where you had 66 other people come forward?
Yeah, I think that has to be part of it. I mean, regardless, a lot of times those things are window dressing, right? But it that has to be part of it. And like I said, I think some of these athletes, not only athletes, but when you make it a significant amount of money, sometimes you assume you're above the law, and part of it is just being smart. And I'm not someone who's had that kind of money, but when you have that kind of money, or prestige, or whatever, you have to believe, especially now, that people are going to come after you in some way. So knowing that, then you need to conduct yourself in a certain way. And I think most of the athletes now are smart enough about their brand. A lot of them are doing things on social media, and they just know about their brand, and it's smart for them long term. And obviously there are things that are hard to kind of hold back from, but it's just, you just have to be smarter than that. And then also, conducting yourself, just holding yourself to a higher standard. And it's tough, I'm sure, to be an athlete and have that kind of money, but you just have to be aware of that, especially when it comes down to your livelihood and those around you as well. And so it was interesting that the Browns gave him that much money. I think that was huge too. And we will see. The Browns were crafty in a way as well, and Deshaun Watson was as well with the. I'm not sure how much it's been talked about either with his salary for this year, right? I mean, it's significantly reduced.
I think with this year he'll be making only $1 million.
Exactly. So then, he really financially can't be, not a lot can be taken, away from him this year. So, but for him, and we talked about kind of image wise, apart from the things they've done, if he, is innocent to a point, you know, you want to rebuild your image, and a lot of it with the athletes as well. It's the marketing dollars and those type of things, and he's definitely losing out on that. It'll be interesting to see kind of if he ever kind of gets back to a point where he is a pitch person. I don't know if I see that, but it just overall, I think the best thing is to kind of get it dealt with, because right now, when you talk about NFL, right, we want positive stories, especially going into camp. We don't want this to be the story. At least if I was the commissioner, I would not want this to always, continue to be the story. I would want to get it dealt with, and let's move on to other, more positive things about the league.
And we'll find out more as the situation unfolds. Deshaun Watson will go to arbitration on Tuesday. We'll get more as soon as we get the details. Unfortunately, a lot of legal situations continue to go throughout the NFL, and one more that seems to have taken a back seat would be Alvin Kamara with his assault and battery back, I believe, in January. So now potentially it seems that a suspension could be looming for him. And I'll start with this point. Each case is different, and we only know so much about what happened, but apparently this was a very vicious attack, and it's now at the point that there's a civil suit pending. So along the lines, Alvin Kamara is definitely going to miss a significant amount of time. What do you think the league's going to have to do to make this kind of decision where it seems fair but firm?
This is an interesting one because I have interviewed a number of Saints podcasters, and even Nola Girl, from Twitter, who is in the community and knows a lot of sources, and they just really haven't heard much about it, and I wonder if since they haven't heard a lot about it, they're trying to kind of negotiate something that's it's something, but not significant. And it's so interesting, when you compare it to other cases. But you know, I I think you have to do, I don't know, 4 or 6 games. I mean, it's interesting because I think, in a few different cases, like 6 games has been the precedent, right? But if you're, any game checks, that is significant. So if they're firm in that, then it sends a message. But then it also, you know, it, it's not gonna, hamper it. I think they do need to make a decision soon as well. Like, to have this also hanging out, over the Saints' head, and training camp. You want to get these things dealt with, especially if their legal matters have, at least close to resolved. With him, it's interesting that they even let him play in the Pro Bowl. That was just odd to me that they knew that happened, but they still let him play in the Pro Bowl.
And a great point there. I mean, it literally had come out that week, and it just seemed like it was just inappropriate at the time, but it was still a pending investigation at that point. But more unfortunately, it's come out. So at this point, the Saints are definitely heading into the season with a lot of question marks. Depending on how much time Kamara misses, you have a team with a new head coach. You have a team that's hoping that Jameis Winston can stay healthy. What's the narrative for the Saints here to get through that suspension, and how's the best way for them to move forward without Alvin Kamara?
Well, with the Saints, a big part of it will be Jameis Winston. Him coming back, and just the focusing on Olave and that defense. So I mean, yes, you have Mark Ingram, you have him there. I think that'll be helpful. Just to kind of have stability, but really focusing on the passing game and then the defense as well. I think those things will be the narratives, to really keep the team afloat, and really look, with the quarterbacks that they had last year, they almost made the playoffs, and with all of the players missing. So really, when you look at that, I think that's a positive. I know the Saints podcasters I've talked to, really like Dennis Allen as coach. Just kind of keeping that stability in his defense, and I think so. Yes, as a new coach, but not really, right? He's been there, been in the system. It's not a completely different system. I think that'll be helpful. Really, you can't replace a talent like Kamara, but you can try to duplicate parts of it. And maybe that's where they use blanking on the tight end name, or the other quarterback. Can't think of his name right now. The backup quarterback Taysom Hill, and that's someone they could even kind of put him in there for a little bit as well, because he can do some things, and offensively that might be a positive thing. But if they really rely on Jameis, who can really get the ball down the field when he's healthy, look for him to have a solid year, and obviously Michael Thomas coming back, so that the passing game can definitely be better, but really the defense, when you look at that, they're able to, I think will be able to, or need to, and be able to step up to keep them in games for when Kamara does come back.
The New Orleans Saints basically buckling up for a potential suspension with Alvin Kamara. Whenever that decision happens going forward, we'll make sure we get that news to you promptly and soon. And coming up next, a lot of sad news out of Baltimore, especially just a rough day in general after the news of Jalen Ferguson and Tony Saragusa passing away. It seems just a lot of bad luck, especially in Ravens territory. Um, I've definitely talked to a few Ravens fans, and just the mood's very somber. Especially had a young man with a bright future ahead of him, and one of their most charismatic players on the defense, especially going into that Super Bowl. Saragusa going on and having a successful career at Fox Sports for over a decade, very well perceived, very well loved and admired. Uh, just from that standpoint, just what's been the mood if you've had a chance to talk to any fans about the situation? What was their take from that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, those. Anytime you have a young player, a young person pass away, I mean, that's tough because it's, you know, y- when you have someone who hasn't lived a full life, that type of thing. I think it's hard to kind of grasp that. And when you look at Jalen, Ferguson, I mean, he was, you know, expected to be part of the team, right? And I think that's it. Just goes to show like how life can how life goes sometimes. But when you look at Siragusa, I mean, he really was just a character, and you look at that. I mean, it's tough to have two people kind of in the Ravens family passing away, and yeah, it is definitely somber. And uh, I think kind of be able to kind of move forward, and hopefully, I think they're going to be able to celebrate both of these, especially Siragusa and Ferguson, this year, and that'll probably bring the fan base together, and you know. Even in training camp, I think, and it can kind of be interesting, to see how the team will respond as well. I mean, I like, what Lamar Jackson. I think he's going to be laser focused anyway, but when you go ahead and add this to it, I think not that it adds extra motivation, but it adds kind of extra kind of meaning. I think to some players when they see that happen, and I really see it. The Ravens having a good season. Um, you know, Even despite all of the tragedy.
And tragedy it is. I'm sure the team's definitely going to use that as motivation going through the season, but it's definitely a hard pill to swallow, especially when you lose someone young and someone that meant so much to that locker room, along with what was potentially just a Baltimore folklore hero. So, our thoughts, prayers, and reflections with all the fans of Baltimore as they get through that situation. On a lighter side of news, of course, one topic we got to touch too, especially it just happened, I think, a day after one of our shows, but Rob Gronkowski calling it a career. Once again, the 11-time Pro Bowler hanging up his cleats, but maybe not for good. Where his agent Drew Rosenhaus has basically said, "We'll see if he picks up that call if Brady calls." So, in your take, do you think Gronk's done for good now? Do you think that there's a potential that maybe there might be a chance he comes back?
I don't think he comes back this year. I think maybe he comes back next year, especially if Tom Brady's somewhere else. Maybe we'll see where that is. I we talked about kind of marketing for some players, and Gronk is just really a master at kind of like going with the kind of the stupid image, right? But he's smart in how he markets himself, with that, and just using these things as a way to kind of generate buzz, and everyone's wanting to know what he's going to do. I mean, he's a fantastic football player. He's had injuries, but we saw, how important he was to the Tampa Bay offense when he was out. And so I think obviously injuries have to be mounting and tough to continue. But I had a chance to. I was living in Mankato, Minnesota, and when Brett Favre was playing, and they would always come, and obviously they're not there now, but they would always come and stay in the dorms in Mankato. And those couple years, it was always speculation of would he come back? Would he? But we all knew that he wasn't going to come back to stay in the dorms. He was going to come back when he wanted to, when and when it was about time for the season, and that's could be what Gronk is doing, whether it's this year or next year, is just kind of taking that time. He's a veteran. He doesn't need training camp. He can just kind of do that Gronk run, Gronk catch thing, and make a lot of money doing that, or make a lot of money doing commercials. So I think it's quite possible he takes this year off and maybe plays next year, but I don't think he's done regardless.
Now, if he is done, where would you rank Gronk as an all tight end?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, yeah, he's one of the great ones. But yeah, I mean, I think of Tony Gonzalez. I mean, before him, I would say, I mean, off the top of my head, he'd probably be top five. Maybe even top three. But you have some like older tight ends as well that were just amazing as well, and I think he's definitely up there. In just what he's been able to do. Um, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say he's the greatest, but he's definitely up there.
Rob Gronkowski potentially hanging him up, but we'll see. And of course, in our final bit of news, and this was just a little bit of breaking about an hour ago, the passing of Marlon Briscoe, the first African American quarterback in the AFL, played for the Denver Broncos, and eventually ended up with the Miami Dolphins and was one of the members of the undefeated 72 Dolphins team. So Briscoe, definitely a trailblazer. So along those lines, it's unfortunate of his passing and just truly a great ambassador to the game. Uh, Along those lines, I feel that this is definitely a player that should definitely get a lot of mention, especially for being one of those trailblazers, because it's so rare when we forget about the guys that actually broke through the barrier, especially in moments where it was just something most people wouldn't see in their lifetime. So, that being said, Briscoe's legacy, how would you define it?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't know much about Briscoe before today, and it's it really is kind of is sad that some of these older players that have broken barriers and just done some things that weren't seen at the time, aren't celebrated and known as much, and it's a shame that we don't talk about them kind of when they're alive as much, because when they pass, I mean, when you look at it, and I didn't know his nickname was the Magician, and so in the '60s, the obviously you look at now today, and you look at him and how his game translates. I mean, he was a quarterback and then moved to wide receiver. And I don't know a lot about him, but I mean, I'm sure that had to be tough as a football player to, a lot of quarterbacks, they want to be quarterbacks, and I mean, we saw that with Tim Tebow. He drug his feet for so long, and but for him to then obviously being the first black starting quarterback in the AFL, in 14 touchdown passes in his rookie year, and then to kind of move on and be solid wide receiver as well. I mean, a Pro Bowl wide receiver. It's a testament to who he was as a player and a person, to obviously translate his skills and continue to be successful.
And we definitely mourn for the family, especially if it's passing, but also, a very strong career, someone who set out and broke the mold of the quarterback situation, getting that opportunity to be the first, even though transitioning to wide receiver, still is a very solid wide receiver, especially for an undefeated team that still sits undefeated in this era.
And just a little bit about him too. I was just kind of looking up. It's interesting how in NFL players, and everyone kind of talks about when your opportunity comes, be ready. And so obviously the story, on September 29th, 1968, starter Steve Tenzie suffered a broken collarbone and backup Joe DeVito was spotty. And so that's when he got his opportunity, and so it kind of is a lesson to all of us. When you get your opportunity, be ready, and I think now, especially, in this day and age of, have to have things now and have to, that it's easy to, I don't know, as quarterbacks or, anybody in life, it's easy to just kind of pout and say, well, I'm not getting what I want now, so I'm not going to try. I'm not going to be ready. But when your opportunity comes, and if you're on a roster, football players, when it comes, if you're ready and you make the most out of it, and whether it's in football or in life, you make the most out of that opportunity, then success can happen. And obviously we saw that with Tom Brady, right? He made the most out of his opportunity and has become the greatest of all time. But yeah, I mean, when you look at players like, Marlon Briscoe, it's just, I wish I would have known kind of more about him before today.
And it is unfortunate that situations like this are the reason that we do find out about, players that broke grounds and or trailblazers of his position, that we do find out about it this way. But we do wish him, and we wish his family, and we wish members of the Denver Broncos, the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, all his teammates, just we wish our thoughts, prayers, and reflections. An unfortunate situation. He passes away. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick 30-second break, and when we come back, there's an ugly side behind the NFL Shield. And NFL Outdated and I are going to go right behind it and break down every bit of it and see if we can help. I'm Michael Bishop with the Power, and we'll be back in 30 seconds. The Power Hour's on the air, live streaming you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. Joining us tonight is NFL Outdated. We're very happy to have him on the show. Great to have new faces in with a lot of great perspective. We want to once again thank him for joining us. And please let the fans know where to find you on all your social media platforms.
Yeah, you can find me NFL Outdated on Twitter and on Instagram, and most importantly on YouTube. Like and subscribe, definitely.
His content's great, and if you're not watching it, you're missing out. And we do our best to make sure that everybody here gets a chance to find all the fresh new faces. NFL Outdated brings that fresh perspective. Check him out. He's worth it. And I'll also take some of that. If you love the show, help it grow. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok at the Power Hour 615. Don't forget, we are doing a contest. It is going to end this Friday. I'm giving away a Mitchell & Ness Eddie George jersey, and I want to give it away to somebody. So don't forget, follow us on YouTube and like us on Twitter. Make sure you use the hashtag Power Hour Giveaway. We're giving that away Friday at noon, so don't forget to enter for that contest. It's a nice jersey. I want to give it to somebody. Help me help you. That's what I'm here for. And as you saw in our commercial, we'll have a Madden tournament coming up at August 15th. We're going to get more details on that, so we're very excited about that. Hopefully the game lives up to the billing as we're hoping. John Madden's on the cover. It needs to. So EA Sports, it's all on you. And we'll get to some of these comments before we get to our next segment. Shout out to Al Pierce. Always great to have you on the show, buddy. Looks like Ducky made it in 2. Good to see you. Our buddy Bryce Pratt on the Bryce Pratt Show. Make sure you check him out. Always good stuff. And also our buddy Ryan Harris with Jump Pass Podcast. Make sure that you check that out. I'm sorry. That was a mouthful. The Jump Pass Podcast. Ryan Harris, check him out. It's a great show. It's on Apple and Spotify. Make sure you check him out there. Well, all right, let's go ahead and jump into our next segment while we're fresh and ready for a deep perspective. As we all know, as we much love the game of football and what it brings, there's also an ugly side to it. And just like with all businesses, it seems like there's shady practices and things that go on that we don't get to see a lot of, but eventually it leaks out to the public. And that seems to have been the case going through the last decade. And I've gone through a few things, mainly six, just to be specific, of what I think's been a huge problem, especially growing within the league. And with the help of NFL Outdated, I'd like to just try and talk through some of these and see if we can give a perspective to help move these forward and make it better, if not try and improve it throughout the league. And unfortunately, there's some ugly ideas that are there, but we're going to get through them because that's what part of life is. We got to do unpleasant things. Sometimes you got to rip the band aid off and throw some Neosporin on those wounds to heal them. So, jumping into it, the main focus here is it's trying to fix the things that are being especially hid and trying to be swept under the rug, because in some cases the NFL's done that. Let's not be modest about this. This is a league that's trying to be persuasive at trying to stay on top, and you don't stay on top, especially without having some dirty laundry. Mainly this quote bringing up, when people cover for the misdeeds of others, they are guilty as those committed the crimes. And it's not to say the NFL is doing highly illegal things all the time out there, but let's be real about it. There are things that they have done that are questionable, and sometimes they're moral at times, and there are things we wish weren't part of the business, but it's something we want to see improved. That's why this segment is here. That's why we're discussing this. So to start out with the first one, let's just jump right into it. And that would be with the Brian Flores lawsuit. And unfortunately, we've heard less and less of it because now it's going to litigation, which was one thing I was afraid of, especially from a standpoint that the NFL wanted to get this behind closed doors and try and discuss it in a way and potentially throw money at the problem and make it go away. So NFL Outdated, I'll let you start on this one. What's the situation with the lawsuit that you've heard, and what's something you'd like to see done about this, even if it's going through litigation?
So yeah, I mean, I haven't really heard a ton about it, and I think that is by design, right? And when you look at this situation, hopefully the biggest thing is, I mean, there really is no reason there that you shouldn't have more African American head coaches, in the NFL. There just really isn't. And when you have owners that are going to be, there's what did Roger Goodell, even with the Dan Snyder stuff, he came out and said he doesn't have the power to remove an owner, and so when you look at that situation and everything that happened, then I mean, NFL is admitting, that type of culture that happened there, and maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. But when you have that the commissioner's not able to kind of really do much, uh, obviously you look at how some of these owners are doing the same old thing over and over again with coaches, the retreads. And I mean, you look at the Giants, and hopefully this will at least bring some light to that, right? I mean, with some of these teams and ownerships, they just seem to be making the same mistakes over and over again with a little accountability. So hopefully, yes, I think money will be thrown at this situation, but maybe this will create a little bit of change within the NFL, and they'll be able to hold the owners a little bit more accountable to actually make change happen, as far as them giving more African Americans a chance. And a lot of it too, you kind of when you look at it, it really, the offensive coordinator is kind of the has been the kind of path to be a head coach, and so hopefully some things can come about where they can continue to develop paths for great coaches to kind of develop into offensive coordinators, and not just some of these old retreads. I mean, when you have the Cowboys that has Mike McCarthy, I mean, it's just I talked about the Giants, year in year out, kind of making the wrong decision here and there. But you just hopefully this will at least kind of bring some more light to it. In Brian Flores, he ended up in probably the best spot with one of the best coaches in the league right now, Mike Tomlin. And I mean, that coaching staff is going to be stacked with Flores there as well, and hopefully Flores can kind of rebuild his image within, coaching, because it had obviously had to be tough to kind of, put himself out there. Um, and hopefully when you look at it too, hopefully it wasn't just, part of it too. It might have been, Brian Flores maybe brought the Patriot way, and we've seen that before, where the Patriot way does not work other places, and so maybe as a coach, maybe he can kind of mature a little bit too, because I did hear from some of my Dolphins guys that his approach didn't help either, and so hopefully it can be a little bit of both. He can kind of, you know, um, obviously rebuild a little bit, and prepare for that next opportunity, and hopefully gets that next opportunity, and also some others as well get that opportunity. It's just like Eric Bieniemy, and it's just or even Byron Leftwich, and will get that opportunity sooner or later.
Really, the most infuriating part of this is that it now goes to litigation. So we're only going to hear just little tidbits of what happened within these situations, maybe even years after this comes out and becomes available to the public. So we don't know what those discussions with the Broncos at that point and with the New York Giants were like, especially when he was going through that job process. And I think the most infuriating part is, especially with what happened with Miami, you had a coach that was winning. And even if he wasn't getting along with the owner, the problem was there's a lot of other shady things going on with the owner where the coach was having to be made done where he wasn't comfortable within that situation. And I don't think that's getting a lot of discussion.
Yeah, I think that is part of it too. Absolutely.
But within that, I still feel it's a lawsuit that needed to just avoid litigation. This is something more than that needs money thrown at it. This is something where I'd like to see more programs and more, opportunities like schools and just one-on-one training with these younger minority coaches where they get better opportunities at potentially having a moment to actually rise up through the ranks, maybe even in the GM settings.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, it comes down to having accountability for the owners. I mean, if they don't get accountability, that's the biggest thing. I mean, they can kind of, when you have owners who are as rich as they are, and we know that, when people are rich, they can find kind of loopholes, and obviously we've heard from some African American coaches who have interviewed that kind of knew that they were just the token coach, African American coach brought in for an interview and to go through the Rooney Rule, and you don't want it just to be just for that. I mean, it sounded like it's provided opportunities, but it's time. You look at leagues like I've been a proponent of the USFL, and they've kind of they're a newer league, right? And they kind of with some of their rules for the games, they've kind of learned on the fly, right? And you pay attention, and hopefully the NFL is now paying attention, and not just sweeping it under the rug, but people that are hopefully there are going to be people there that are going to, regardless if it's in litigation, that are going to now look at this and because whether it's players or owners, with social media, everyone is under more scrutiny now. Everyone can see more, and things can get out there. So hopefully, then there's a little bit more accountability to say, okay, this needs to change. Let's learn, and let's change rather than just keep things the way they are, just because that's the way we do them.
And that's all we can hope going forward, that there's significant change there and this lawsuit eventually pushes the wheels of change forward. But Brian Flores, I'm very fortunate that he is employed somewhere and in a good position with the Pittsburgh Steelers, as you said, because I know a lot of fans were worried that he was going to get blacklisted, which is another subject we'll bring up later. But it definitely is a little more perspective and a little more calming to know that he's being looked after by a fellow head coach. Our next one will definitely be one the NFL definitely likes to try and duck. And it's something that's been growing, especially in the last decade. CTE is something that's unavoidable at this point, and we've seen what it's brought to the table, especially the former players. As far as it goes, there's so little we know and so much we're trying to figure out at this point. But it's one thing the NFL has done everything in its power to try and avoid. Unfortunately, being pushed to the point where they now have to try and address this is how it's moved forward. So, with the CTE discussion, it's already been to the point where the NFL has already given over $1 billion in lawsuits over these settlements over the last 2 years, but it's taken progressive lawsuits to move this forward. So while the NFL has said they're trying to do to improve concussions, they definitely move away from the CTE discussion when it comes to it. So, what's it going to take for the NFL to actually make steady progressive change to try and help these players, especially after their playing careers are over?
Unfortunately, I mean, when you kind of look at it, I think it's, when more of the kind of older players, started to pass away, or maybe even more of the younger players, I think, um, because a lot of times when you have some of the older players pass away, it's like they allow them to study their brains and say, okay, this happened, and but if there's the younger players, I think that resonates. Then I mean, obviously in the media a little bit more. Okay, oh wow, he was this is gone way too soon type of thing, and I think that's what it's going to take to just kind of like obviously they've been doing things. I mean, you even see like at practice and stuff, they've got these things on their helmets, especially for quarterbacks and to study and stuff. So they're studying the brain. They're studying kind of the effects of things. Um, and maybe that's probably why we don't hear about it as much. We haven't had, unfortunately, I mean, you talk about it, I mean, mostly when there's a death, right? Like Junior Seau, so unfortunately, that's what brings things back into discussion, is when there's a death, and you know, so maybe it's a younger player, maybe it's someone who's even middle aged. I think that'll what that'll take is you know reminding us that, yeah, I mean, if it's a younger player, that yes, they're doing all these steps to kind of make things safer, but it's still a violent game.
And that being said, I mean, the biggest thing that comes up why CTE is a big part of it is a lot of these deaths are suicides,
Hmm.
mainly because these players come up through depression. They have angry outbursts. They forget where they are sometimes. You know, situations where people don't have to go through till they get much older. But throughout the major trauma and head trauma at that, it seems it speeds up the process. And one of the scary things is most of these players don't realize it until it's too late. So, that being said, I know there's only so much you can do with a concussion protocol, and there's only so much we can do now knowing what we know. But would it be interesting to try and help some of these players by trying to maybe? I've heard some ideas of maybe making the helmet smaller to actually slow the game down just a bit. Would that be an option?
I don't see that happening, just with how fast and strong all these players are. I don't see that happening. Um, it's just, I think obviously the cat's out of the bag with that. I mean, it's just um, just I think the more that they learn about the brain, I think that'll help. But there's always going to be that risk, and if you make the helmet smaller, then it's taking away something that can protect the brain.
And on that point, I agree. It's just really you just have to kind of kick some ideas around to see if there's anything feasible to make this a more addressable issue. And unfortunately, it's one of these things where just innovation has to come into place. Potentially maybe building a helmet to the shoulder pads, maybe to
Mhm.
improve some form of just impact, maybe with shock absorbing on the neck. I don't know. I mean, there's many discussions you can get at it, but unfortunately, CT's here to stay unless the NFL is willing to try and actually admit that it's a thing going on in their league and willing to try and fix it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at obviously they've tried to do a lot of things with helmets, but then even with the kickoffs, things like that they've done with field goals, extra points. I mean, they've tried some different things, but there's always something else you can kind of look at, and I think maybe in a way, having some of these other leagues like the XFL that's coming as well. I mean, that can be kind of a proving ground as well to say, okay, well, these are some things that can help. These are some pieces of equipment that can help make the game safer. I mean, um, unfortunately, I mean, when you look at it, it is a violent game, and these players are getting stronger and faster. They've find ways to shave time off of their 40. And they're just all the different things they're trying to study to make it safer. There's all these other trainers that are studying it to make them faster and stronger as well. So, with that, I mean, you can't stop that part of it, and you can't stop the speed of the game. I can't imagine as an NFL player, some of the things that they've done, for the defense, to be able to make that decision in a split second, to, raise your head or not raise your head. I mean, those are things that, or at least, trying to address it, but that's got to be tough. I mean, even though you're a professional athlete, just to be able to, control your body that way. And unfortunately, accidents are going to happen.
And hopefully, this is a situation we can see some steady progress going forward into the next decade or two, because the way it looks, a lot of these older players continue to regress with these situations, and no one wants to see their favorite player end up on the paper after a suicide attempt or committed suicide.
Absolutely not. Yep.
And moving forward, and we'll touch on this just a little bit because I think it does tie in with the first one, but I think it's a subject within its own. Where I do feel the Rooney Rule, when it was created, it has continued to be misused just as kind of a stepping stone, just to check the box. And unfortunately, that's the biggest problem. So I know we've already discussed this about the first one, but we won't try and spend a little too much time on it. But is there really any real way to try and make the Rooney Rule more progressive without using it as a stepping stone?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, what are you going to do to owners if they, are caught, just using a stepping stone? I mean, somehow, having owners have accountability. And right now, when you have a commissioner that says he can't really, remove an ownership, he can't really do anything. And that's got to be, even going back to the Deshaun Watson stuff, right? I mean, that's got to be an interesting thing for the NFLPA, right? Even look at, Daniel Snyder, if I mean, what can you do if you don't do anything to Daniel Snyder, but you do something to you suspend Watson for the year. You suspend Alvin Kamara, right? And all everything aside, the cases aside. I mean, the players, that's a fraternity. I mean, I've interviewed some past players, and that's a special fraternity. And when you look at it, regardless of who it is, if the NFL is doing something, suspensions, fines for players, but then you don't have that type of, suspensions or fines for coaches, sorry, not coaches, for coaching searches, fines for owners, and really holding them accountable to say, yeah, I mean, yes, you own these billion-dollar franchises, but there is accountability, and maybe even making them, come and speak in front of, you know, um, uh, fans or something to say, okay, you need to answer all these things in an honest way. I mean, it's just what it comes down to is having the owners, have accountability, because when you look at it, I mean, you can't tell me some of these NFL coaches. I mean, obviously, I'm not in the room, right? But I'm a Bears fan, and Matt Nagy, just held on, to his coaching position well past what he should have. And a lot of it was because of ownership, and it was poorly run. The Bears were poorly run, for years. And there was, no one doing anything about it. And now finally, I think, they've got a better situation now. They've got a general manager, but now they've also got an assistant general manager. They've actually got leadership there that can kind of help. But before it was just the owners, which is the McCaskey family and their finance guy, basically kind of deciding, well, and then the owners, George McCaskey, said that he wasn't really a football guy. He didn't really know much, but he was making these decisions. And so you have these rich people kind of making decisions. They don't know much about football. So how are you going to, hold them accountable to, making the right decisions rather than just, this is a friend of a friend. This is a name, rather than some of these, rising African-American coaches, assistant coaches that really, if given an opportunity, would definitely be successful.
And it's funny you bring up the owners because this does tie in with 3, but you must have peeked at my notes because really the 4th one is little to no accountability for NFL owners' actions. And that's been a huge problem, especially the last 5 to 6 years. I mean, you have Daniel Snyder with a sexual assault case, which was covered up and basically just paid away in 2009. Robert Kraft being charged with prostitution to 2020, and the Florida state legislature dropping it. And then Jerry Jones with a potential sexual harassment case that was basically settled, I believe, in 2014. And now, as of what I'm hearing in 2022, a potential paternity suit over a woman that claims that she's one of his children. So once again, you have owners running rampant with no consequences, and the league's supposed to be squeaky clean. And the motto is protect the shield, where in some cases, in this instance, we protect the shield, but the guys that are making money for the shield seem to have some form of just unresponsibility. So when does it end?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when you look at it, with everything that's happened in Washington, Daniel Snyder, and this, I don't really have a dog in the fight here, but Daniel Snyder being removed, from ownership. I think if they see, if the Players Association, and the fans and the media, everybody sees, the NFL taking this seriously, and actually removing an ownership, because when you look at CEOs and things like that, they lose jobs for things like that, or they should. Obviously a lot of them have high priced lawyers and things like that, but when you look at this, you can't just cover it up everything. If you're having to go before these hearings before Congress, the Senate, whatever, you there has to be something there. And if they're going to continue to make these decisions on players, the morality of players in some of their off the field crimes and things like that, then the owners have to be held accountable for their crimes as well.
Exactly.
And especially with that type of working environment, and you can't continue to sweep it under the rug. I mean, I really think that is an important case with this Daniel Snyder stuff. Obviously, we talk about Deshaun Watson. It's going to be interesting to see, what they decide there. But I really think if they do something, if they do a year on Deshaun Watson, and don't do anything with Daniel Snyder, and
it's hypocrisy.
It totally is, and I just obviously I'm just speculating. I don't know. I mean, why wouldn't players I don't know if they would sit out or anything like that, but there would be some type of protest. I think if it came down and Daniel Snyder was still allowed to be owner, and even the kind of owner in proxy, of his wife, or if was still owner, I think some accountability that way. They need to be everyone needs to be shown that the NFL will hold its owners maybe even to a higher standard, right?
And they should be. I mean, if the code of conduct, follows through the players, the one for the owners is certainly much more higher, and they're held to a higher accountability. And regardless of their stature or their finance or wealth, it doesn't matter at that point. They're representing the league. And if the league is going to hold players responsible for their actions, then owners have to be held higher of that accountability. And while Roger Goodell does say he does not have the power to remove Daniel Snyder, he does have the power to start those proceedings.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess who does have the power then?
The owners. Really, it comes down.
Mm-hmm.
It comes to Roger Goodell putting it to a vote with the other 31 owners if they want him removed. Same situation with Jerry Richardson and the Carolina Panthers when he was removed in 2020. So Goodell does not have the authority to remove him personally, but he has the authority to set up the proceeding to do it.
You know, that's so interesting because I don't think we hear a lot, you know, lately about that. It's easy to forget that, you know, Jerry Richardson, you know, story, you know,
It is. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that's what I was just kind of thinking. Yeah, I mean, because you don't hear, I had forgotten about that, you know, and you kind of look at that, you know, so there is precedent there before. You know, you start those proceedings, you say, okay, you know, this needs a change. You know, the Washington franchise, um, whether you're, you know, there's some people that are still kind of, you know, stuck on the Redskins name or whatever, but you know, they did the facelift of that, you know, with the name change and everything. But you really need to clean house as far as ownership wise as well, and really kind of, you know, just all of his missteps as well, and just say, okay, you know, thank you for your time. You're going to get a ton of money to sell this. Let's find some owners, and that might be an opportunity then, you know, to kind of really try to attract, you know, some minority owners as well to be a part of these things, and I think that's what the NFL needs as well. Kind of more, you know, to just kind of continue to move things forward as far as giving people an opportunity to own these teams. I mean, you look at the Bears, you know, that's a family run organization, and it was run horribly, you know, and has been for so long. But you know, I mean, they're making money, so they're not going to, you know, take it away from them, or you know, really hold them accountable to put a good product on the field. Um, you know, so it's a family run organization. It's easy to just kind of keep that in the family, but then, you know, if it's in the family, then you're not going to have that accountability. You're not going to have an opportunity then for, you know, other, you know, owners, you know, to really kind of step up and really kind of, you know, have a voice within the NFL as well.
And it comes down to basically just if the NFL is going to continue to protect these owners, it just shows that Roger Goodell is weaker than we thought he was. And we know really where the real power is, and it's with the owners. Granted, Jerry Jones and Robert Kraft are very influential people in the league, but at the same time, if they're getting busted for prostitution stings and basically being have suits put against them through children that might be their own, that raises huge questions about just their character and if the league should want them being represented by them.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head right there.
But getting to our next one, and I think this one's a very major point right here. And it basically gets swept under the rug consistently, but we hear about it every year with one player or two players or moving all down the line. But domestic violence in the league has basically been the norm for the last decade. Since the Ray Rice incident that occurred in 2014, where the video came out after the punishment was handed, even Roger Goodell admitting that he had known about there being a video at the time when it was released. Basically, this was the whole situation that could have cost Roger Goodell his job, baiting him to come out and saying that they were going to do better. They were going to try and proceed in a better fashion in these cases. And really, it just seems like more of the same. It just depends on the context of it. I mean, if there's a video, apparently the NFL is not really going to make a big deal about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I mean, it's such a, you know, when you look at these wives and girlfriends, and you know, uh, uh, of these NFL players, and a lot of, I mean, there has to be, you know, a lot of pressure as well, because you know, if something happens, you know, to them, then you know they're not provided for. They're, you know, it's it's just everything, unfortunately everything is about money, right? And if something comes up, charges can get dropped or whatnot pretty quickly. And so I don't know. It's hard to really kind of speak on it because I don't know specific cases, but yeah, I mean, you do see charges being dropped, and it's really kind of a you know catch 22. I mean, because when you think about it, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think you want everyone, you know wives and girlfriends, you want them to be safe and everything, and but a lot of times they need to be able to kind of speak up, and say, okay, no, this, they're gonna charge, and go through with everything, and it's tough. I mean, there's so many things that go into it, and I think, like anything, I think the NFL, is trying to kind of do things toward it, but it's a tough subject.
And it is. And really, that also falls in line with children.
Hmm.
There's been reports of children being mistreated or suffering through domestic violence in these
Hmm.
situations. And where along the lines it comes up again, the NFL says that they're trying to protect, the spouses and the families and trying to show that responsibility there. But yet, it's like when it comes time to do it, they just skid away from it, or they just potentially do a light suspension or a fine or here or there. And it's disheartening, especially, if you're a woman that's a fan of the league and you're seeing that this is a rampant problem.
Well, not only, I mean, a fan of the league, but when you see any type of business that is kind of like sweeping under the rug, things that are not keeping people safe. It's disheartening. It's sad, uh, but I think obviously you want to continue to keep people safe as much as you can.
And really, it's a subject where it's like there's so many things that go into it. And as you said, there are a lot of people with a lot of ties to things. And it's scary to think about those situations, especially if you're a woman that suffered through one of those things, and to feel like that you're a second class citizen going forward with that. Because nowadays, you just want to feel like that your voice is heard. And respectfully, I do feel that that's something that the NFL has failed to do on a bigger standpoint, especially when 40%, 47% of your fans are women. No matter what you say, that's bad for business. And also, you're basically contradicting what you said back in 2014. So, what I'd like to see the league do is actually follow up on these. Ray Rice was a growing star. Let's not kid ourselves. I felt at the point Ray Rice could potentially be a potential breakout star in the league. And what he did was on his own merit, and he's living through the punishment. And as we know now, it would seem that him and his then girlfriend have reconciled and worked things out. And I hope that that continues to do well. And I hope they continue to seek counseling as they've been doing. But situations like that, it's very frustrating, especially when the league's trying to say that they're going to do better to protect women and show that they're not going to put money figures in front other than personal well-being. It's still yet to be seen on a larger scale.
Yeah.
And to finish off, and this is definitely one that comes up in a lot of discussions, and really I'll just get to the heart of it. Colin Kaepernick basically made the choice to take a knee back in 2016, and I'm fine for what he was doing. I'm fine for him making that stand. That's fine. My point here is the NFL's basically blacklisted him, and it's basically just not talked about. Now, I will say this: I understand his passer rating's not the kind of passer rating a team would want to try and go after as a quarterback. There's many underlining things there as a player. But along the lines, I can think of a lot of players that got jobs over Colin Kaepernick. That's very just confusing to me. It's basically the league saying, you can take a stand for something, But believe me, when it starts rocking the boat, don't expect us to be there when you really need our help.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, I mean, really, taking a knee, it's really, um, I remember thinking back then, I'm like, obviously I'm not a military, I've never been in the military, but taking a knee, how disrespectful was it? It really, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't. He was taking a stand, and or taking a knee. Taking a stand by taking a knee, and it's okay that he did that. So a big thing. I'm sure part of it too. You know, yeah, I mean, you look at it. Ownership doesn't necessarily have accountability. At some point, you kind of wondered, did he, almost kind of, um, eventually did he then not want to keep playing in the NFL? And you kind of wonder now, I mean, does he still want to play in the NFL? I mean, he's doing, you know, um, plenty of things kind of, but does he want to be back in the NFL? And it really, I mean, that would be tough, to take that much time off of, the NFL and be a starting quarterback. Um, I think he could probably help a team, as a backup and kind of work his way into a starting role. Um, does he want that? I don't know. But yeah, what it comes down to, I mean, owners, not wanting that the attention, for him, coming to their team and then kind of looking at that rather than looking at the talent at that time. I mean, yeah, I mean when he his first couple years, yeah, he definitely should have gotten a job back then, and because he was still in the NFL, at least a role to prove himself and say yes, he can play quarterback at a high level, and so yeah, it's interesting how that kind of works, and once again, I think the NFL kind of does its own thing the way it wants to.
And that's really the problem. The NFL is basically along the lines letting these players think that they can say or express themselves as they wish. And for certain things, especially if they have merit and they have facts that back them up, then that's fine. I'm all for that. The problem is the NFL seems to duck the situation if it just makes them look bad. And then when it comes time for if the player's looking for a new home or a contract, it seems like they're kind of just hinting at you might not want to touch this guy because he's just not going to be good financially. And that's just what I see in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that as much. I think part of it. You look at just everything that kind of would come the attention that would have been brought and but when you look at what some of these other players have done in their personal life and or in any job there's things that you would get fired from your job if you did but simply kind of taking a knee, or just, if you were to, and try to like comp it, just kind of regular job. If you were to, I don't know, not, sit in a chair at a desk job or so, I don't know if you were going to, do something, that would be cumulative or similar in your day job, it would not be a fireable offense. It's not like he was cussing anybody out. It was a quiet protest, and I think obviously we're allowed to do those things, and and people are allowed to disagree with them. But that doesn't mean that you don't get another opportunity to at least try out before. I don't know how many years later now it's been.
And like I said, you know, and I agree with what you've said. There was nothing negative about this. This was a quiet, peaceful way to exempt yourself, and on a major platform. And he sacrificed that because he felt that it was right. And in every sense, it is right. It was an issue that needed to be discussed. And the one thing that I will basically point my finger at the NFL and shame them for is they didn't come to him and try and make this a situation where they could work it out and discuss this and make it something that the league could gather around. They made it as a point where it became a negative, and while everyone came and fed it as a negative, they seemed to just kind of just, well, we'll support it, halfway, but I guess after that, everybody's fine with that. And that's not fixing the problem. That's just putting a band aid on a bullet hole.
Absolutely.
So, throughout all these discussions throughout the NFL, it has its flaws, like every other league in this country. The biggest thing is the NFL is the most viewed and the most popular sport in the country. And with that, it needs to understand, as it's trying to appeal to younger and more generations to continue to watch the game, we have to remember that the off season and everything else becomes just as big as the regular season. And the selling point is that not everything is good news, and the NFL needs to understand that. Throughout its problems and through everything that we've discussed tonight, there are ways to fix this, but it only comes when the league and when the Players Association are willing to sit down and make these changes that are viable, especially to the success going forward.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to bring, the NFL PA has to be, valued and there, and not just, okay, an afterthought. I mean, really, the players are the thing that, makes this league go. I mean, uh, it yes, I enjoyed watching the USFL and some of these other leagues, but and the quality was better than other leagues have been. But it was clear that the top players are in the NFL, and that's the product, and if you're going to really take it seriously, and let the players have a voice as much as the owners, or at least closer, you need to do something.
Agreed. And as somebody that basically reports throughout the NFL year round, you know, I don't want to talk about legal cases. I don't want to talk about these things, but unfortunately, it's something that drives the narrative. I'd like to see fewer of those things going forward, and hopefully that can be the case. Because the NFL, regardless, regular season or not, it draws interest. And while some say, any press is good press, I would argue that it's not, especially in a narrative and in a country where things are rapidly changing, where the narrative and the mindset is changing. Because, especially in the cases of certain of these subjects, such as race and such as gender, it becomes a bigger issue, especially when the league is protecting these players and not the people that should be being protected.
Absolutely. Yep.
So all I can say to end this segment is just going forward, it's easy to hope and wish that these situations can be rectified, but it only happens at the top and works its way down. That's how these situations always get fixed. And whether it be through Roger Goodell's tenure or through another commissioner's tenure, I hope that I can see it in my lifetime where the league actually becomes more sustainable, and one where you see players actually trying to live their best lives and be better model citizens and husbands and fathers throughout the community. One can hope, but it's always going to start with just change. And change is the big key factor here. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us on the show tonight. I would especially love to thank NFL Outdated for joining us tonight on the show with his perspective. Really enjoyed having you on tonight, man. Had a great time.
Thanks again. I appreciate you asking me. It's always interesting to talk about NFL, and interesting to talk about some of the things that don't get talked about.
And hopefully we can get you back on here when the season kicks off and there's just a lot of football to talk about, and we just talk about nothing but football.
Let's do it, and hopefully I can get a beard as glorious as yours.
That's just years of practice, my friend.
Yeah.
And I love the t-shirt, by the way. So yes, please say Ferris. And wanted to make sure that you give a shout out to everybody, let them know where to find you on all your social media platforms before we get out of here tonight.
Yep. NFL Updated on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Instagram.
And we definitely appreciate you once again for being on the show. We are going to get you back on as soon as the regular season rolls around. Thank you very much, sir, for your time.
Thanks again.
And once again, guys, I appreciate you all for watching the show. Don't forget on your way out to like, subscribe, ring the bell for more content if you're watching YouTube. And if you haven't, where are you? You're missing out, man. And don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok at the Power Hour 615. Don't forget our contest that we're having at the end of Friday noon. You can win that Mitchell and Ness Eddie George jersey. I want to give this thing away. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page and follow us on Twitter. Hashtag the Power Hour giveaway. You're good to go. You're locked in. I got you. NFL Outdated, we want to thank you once again for joining us tonight. Thank you for your time, sir. And all our fans out there tonight, thank you for joining us. I'm Michael Bishop with the Power Hour. Take care and tighten up.